Hey everybody, welcome back to Carnivore Quest. Larry here. Glad to stop by for a few minutes. Is alcohol part of a carnivore diet? Well, it shouldn't be, right? Most folks know that, but a lot of people find that when they start a carnivore diet, they realize how attached they are to their alcohol. I've been sober today 9 years. I haven't had a drop of alcohol in 3,287 days. And yes, I did look that up today. But seriously, it's probably the most asked question I get through email and private messages is how I stopped drinking. Well, today I'm going to tell you exactly what happened on the day I quit. Most of you watching this video know that alcohol almost destroyed my life. It almost killed me. And I was really looking for the right time to sit down and record this video. Just this week, I probably got 6 or 7 messages from people asking about alcohol because they saw some of our previous, content. And, like I said, I had to wait for the right time. I almost made this video when I hit 3,000 days sober, but I still hadn't sat down and really explained how I fell in the bottle, how I became an alcoholic. And now I have done that. I released a video going over my sister's murder, my mom's murder. I felt like people needed to know how I got there. You know what I'm saying? Before I sat down to make this video. And, 9 years today, I thought this is the perfect time. Something like this has to be right in your heart, and I'm really hoping this reaches somebody out there who might be struggling, but I want to give everyone fair warning. I am going to talk about my faith in this video. I cannot talk about this subject without going there. And who doesn't like miracles, right? Even if you're not a Christian, who doesn't like a story of the angel saving the people in the car accident, or, you've heard stories of miracles in your life. Well, a real miracle happened to me. And I've only stood up and gave this testimony one time in my life in public. And I've touched on it a little bit here and there on the channel, on live streams, a couple live streams mainly. But I've never gone into detail about exactly what happened to me the day I got sober. And so I'm going to go over that today in this video. If that's not something you're cool with, go ahead and click off now. But I encourage you to listen because it's an amazing story. I look back on it now and I absolutely can't believe it. So after 6 or 7 years of drinking myself to death, I finally tried to get sober. I came to the conclusion I was an alcoholic, and if I wanted to save my marriage, I had to stop drinking. Then I came to the conclusion I couldn't stop. I really tried. I saw psychiatrists, I saw therapists, I tried everything modern medicine has to offer with my grief over my sister and then my mom's murder 10 years later. And Cassie will back me up on that. I tried everything. And, I was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder. One psychiatrist said she was surprised I didn't suffer from split personalities. Okay. But the main problem I was having was I was having flashbacks of the actual event of my mom's death. And what I mean by flashbacks, you're just going through life and I would have these flashes like a movie playing in my head. And the only thing that would get rid of it was alcohol. Alcohol did the job, as it was killing me, it did give me relief from what I call flashes. And they were torture, and I didn't witness my mom's murder, but I knew what happened down to every detail. I talked to witnesses, I read the police report, and, it was a very gruesome event. Anyway, that's what drove my drinking, basically, was those flashes that I couldn't control. And this wasn't like at night while I was sleeping. Like during the day. It's just this constant thing that would pop up in my head. And, you know, I hear about guys coming back from war and then, you know, I've heard them talk about similar things. And I can't even imagine that, you know, where you've actually witnessed death and destruction and you're reliving that every day. I really feel for our veterans who go through that, because I've had a glimpse of that. You know what I mean? Just a sliver. Yeah, I got to the point where I tried on my own. I tried AA and it just didn't work for me. And so I finally got into a 28-day program, and I went in, came out. And this program was, you know, you go in, you walk around in your bathrobe all day, you go to a couple of AA meetings, you talk with some counselors. You know, I remember they charged my insurance company like 30 grand for me to go there. And, you know, it was all well and good. But I got home and I was doing the 12-step program. And I was on my 4th step. I remember that. And I got a sponsor through AA. And, you know, of the 4 steps where you take your inventory. And I just relapsed on July 3rd, which was the anniversary of my mom's murder. And the day before, July 2nd, that evening, I went and drove and I picked up a 5th of Jägermeister and some Red Bull. I brought it back home. I put it in the garage. Cassie wasn't aware of it. And it's like I just did it automatically. And the following day, I woke up. Cassie went to work and I opened the bottle and I drank it without hesitation, which is total insanity to me, you know. So I relapsed, and I relapsed hard, very hard. It was worse than when I quit, and I didn't even think that was possible. Fast forward 4 months and Cassie was at her wit's end. I mean, she was done with me. She basically hated my guts. I've said it before, I wasn't a violent drunk, you know, but I was just a drunk. She was tired of watching me kill myself, and she was just done. You know, I'm surprised she lasted that long, to tell you the truth. We lived in the Chicago area at the time, and Cassie's brother lived in South Carolina, and he knew of a ministry that had a 7-month program, Miracle Hill Ministries, and the program was called The Overcomers. And so Cassie said, well, she told me you're going, you know, and I didn't want to go. I had never been away from little Larry that long, 7 months, you know, and 1,000 miles away. But Cassie was like immediately, yeah, you're going. If you don't, our marriage is over. And at this point, you guys, I was suicidal. I mean, let me just be honest with you. I remember one time Cassie she couldn't take it. She got little Larry, packed a suitcase, and went to her dad's in Michigan for a couple days. And, you know, of course, I let loose. I was upset she was gone. And, you know, I blackout drunk, and I had a barrel of a gun in my mouth, you know, and I ended up passing out, waking up with a gun next to me, which scares the hell out of me just thinking about it now. But, you know, I wasn't in a good place. So, you know, I had no choice. I had to go to this program. And on the evening of November 6th, my son Cody and my brother-in-law, Jeff, Cassie's brother, who I'm real close with, they drove me down to South Carolina, straight through, over 1,000 miles. I remember when we left the house, Cassie wasn't even there. Cassie had left for work, and I remember she gave me a hug and just looked at me and she said, good luck, you know, and it was like another 4, 5, 6 hours before we left for South Carolina. But, you know, I got on my knees and I hugged little Larry goodbye, and I got in the car. And when we drove away, I was looking out the back window at little Larry, and, you know, I broke down big time. 2-3 miles down the road, Jeff pulled over, and, you know, he got me a couple bottles of Jägermeister for the road. He probably didn't want to hear me cry the whole way, you know. But yeah, so I drank the whole way down there, and we drove all night. And the next morning, we met Cassie's other brother, Steve, at a Waffle House that was near where he lived. Well, gang, here we are at the exact Waffle House that my son Cody and my brother-in-law, Uncle Jeff, dropped me off at 9 years ago. And I had no idea, I'll tell you, what the next 48 hours had in store for me. Pretty crazy. We now live about 5 miles from here, which is pretty cool, you know. So It's a trip being back here. I haven't been back here in a while. I was in bad shape that morning. You know, I drank all night on the way down here, and I didn't know if I'd ever see Cassie again, you know, and that's the truth. So it's pretty crazy. The big Waffle House sign. But, man, God is good. Here we are. Anyway, pretty cool to stop by here. Wanted to show you guys. So I hugged Cody and Jeff goodbye, and they turned around and they drove straight through all the way back up. And you guys, if you see this video, I love you too. You know how much that meant to me. You know, 22 hours of driving straight. For somebody who didn't deserve it. Anyway, Steve took me back to his house, and I showered up and changed. And I took a little nap, and then he took me over to the Overcomers, and they checked me in. You know, they checked all my belongings. They threw away a lot of my clothes because they smelled like cigarettes. And we were at that Waffle House. I was like chain smoking. There was no smoking at the Overcomers. And, you know, so I had my last cigarettes in the parking lot of that Waffle House. They threw, like I said, they threw most of my clothes away because they smelled like cigarettes. And they actually had a closet with donated clothes. And so I got some, you know, some new threads. And I'll tell you, I wasn't feeling real well. And it was in the afternoon. I was away from little Larry and away from Cassie, and I was just like, you know, what is going on here? This is going to be my home for the next 7 months. So after the intern was, you know, finished going through my stuff and, you know, got me some new clothes and some toiletries and stuff, I met one of the counselors, and he said, hey, my friend, he said, tell me, how bad do you want to change your life? And I remember I said to him, I don't have a life. And he said, we'll see about that, you know, and he patted me on the back. But soon after that, it was dinner time, and then they had chapel. There was chapel in the mornings and the evenings every night. The Overcomers is in an old monastery that was previously owned by the Catholic Church. And it's beautiful. Well, the ministry bought it, I think, for like $2.5 million, and they completely converted it into housing for 80 men. I mean, that's how many men can stay at the Overcomers, you know, at once. Didn't sleep too well. I gotta tell you. In the following morning, 5:30 a.m. Over the PA system, you know, it's time to wake up, guys. They play some music, and it's lights on at 5:30 a.m. You go down for prayer, and then you head to the cafeteria. I was not feeling well at all. I remember feeling really lightheaded. And, you know, I had detox before, like, you know, when I went to that 28-day rehab, they actually had me do a medical detox in a hospital for 3 days. And I never like got real bad shakes or never hallucinated or anything like that. So I knew I'd be fine without a detox. You don't feel good, right? I had the shakes a little bit. But I remember when I was at that hospital detoxing, I remember a guy who only drank beer. He drank like a case of beer a day, maybe more. And he couldn't even feed himself. He was shaking so bad. The other people who were in there detoxing, we actually had to help him eat because he couldn't hold a spoon because his hands were shaking so bad. So people detox differently. You know, your body reacts to the alcohol withdrawal differently. But I wasn't feeling good at all. And a couple of the guys were in line for food said, man, you don't look good. You know, they said I was really white. I was sweaty. So they actually put me on bed rest my first day, which they do not usually do that. They're not a medical facility. You know what I mean? Normally you would go right to work at the warehouse. You know, when you're level 1, you go work at one of their thrift stores, like unloading trucks, or you earn your keep. You work for like 4 hours and then you come back, you know, and finish out your day with classes and counseling and different stuff. It's not a free ride. It is a free program, but you know, you got to earn your way while you're in there. But they did give me the bed rest. You know, I'd been in bed all day and I skipped lunch, but one of the counselors came in and told me they wanted me to come down and eat dinner. So I went down, ate some food, and then they had evening chapel right after that. You know, there's a chapel in the facility. You know, different things can happen in chapel. They might have speakers from other churches. maybe from a Baptist church one day, and the following day it's a preacher from a Pentecostal church. That's one cool thing about the ministry. They really expose you to all different denominations of Christianity, but no preacher visited that night. It turned out it was one of the overcomers was going to give their testimony. Someone who had been there 6 months. He was on his final month before he graduated the program. And it was this 22-year-old kid named Logan. And so we get in the chapel, and I'm sitting like in the second row back. And, 80 men in there. It's just us. There's no counselors. It's just us. And Logan's up on the stage. And he starts to talk about what God has done in his life. And I'm just sitting there listening. And then he reads this passage. The return of the unclean spirit. When the unclean spirit has gone out of a person, it passes through waterless places, seeking rest, but it finds none. Then it says, I will return to my house from which I came. And when it comes, it finds the house empty, swept, and put in order. Then it goes and brings with it 7 other spirits more evil than itself, and they enter and dwell there. And the last state of that person is worse than the first. So also will it be with this evil generation. This is from the Gospel of Matthew, and I believe it's also in Luke, the return of the unclean spirit. So as he's reading this, I listened to him, but it wasn't until he explained what that meant to him that really my ears started perking up. He talked about his relapse. He was a heroin addict, and he talked about getting sober for a year, and then he had a relapse. The return of the unclean spirit explained his relapse perfectly. And he described, he got rid of the heroin, he sobered up, he cleaned up his house, it was swept, kept clean, and then he allowed it to return. And when it did, it returned with a vengeance. He talked about the fact that his house was empty, and he had to fill that with God. And once he filled his house with God, meaning himself with the Holy Spirit, it would be much harder for those evil spirits to return. And I'm paraphrasing here, but when he said that, I was it totally explained what happened to me in my relapse. I remember being sober those 4 months, and I was still having those flashes, that feeling of being empty inside. I was white knuckling it, going to AA meetings, trying to save my marriage. I really didn't care about my life. I cared about Cassie, in our marriage. And I want to say it was for all the wrong reasons, but that's not it. But when Logan read this scripture and then he explained what it meant to him, it really hit me. I had no need for God in my life. I want to say I didn't believe in him, but if anything, I was angry with him and I hated him. So anyway, that night I went to bed, and my roommate, who had also been in the program for like 6 months, he was on a 2-day pass. So I was in the room alone. And all night I was having these nightmares. I would dream for like 20 minutes of like hellish landscapes and my mom's murder playing over and over in my head. And then I would wake up in a sweat, and I would go into the bathroom, and I remember throwing up a couple times and coming back out. And I remember just laying there missing Cassie and missing little Larry and crying, bawling my eyes out and saying out loud, please, God, if you're there, please stop this, help me, and then it would happen again. I'd fall asleep for 20 minutes and with those same night terrors, and I would, it was a long, long night. And as I look back on it now, there was spiritual warfare going on there. There was a battle for my soul, and I didn't realize it at the time. So anyway, I made it through November 8th, and that was my first day sober. Now, you guys are seeing this video on November 9th, and the morning of November 9th, I got up, and chapel was right after breakfast, so it was like 6:30 in the morning. And there was a preacher speaking that morning from a local church, and his name was Big Fred. Fred reminded me of the dad from Good Times, James. He was towering. He was like 6'3", real stocky guy. Looked like he definitely probably played football or something in high school. I remember coming in and I was like in the 5th or 6th row, of the chapel. And the entire time Big Fred was preaching, he was staring right into my eyes. And I'm not exaggerating. For like 25 minutes, he just never broke eye contact with me. And he did an altar call, at the end. And I remember standing up, and I wasn't consciously thinking about it. I remember just standing up and going up to the little stage he was on. It's like 2 steps high. But I probably looked like a zombie from The Walking Dead, my feet dragging. But I got to the altar and I dropped to my knees and I just started crying, and I had this wave come over me of warmth. And Big Fred put his hand on my head and he started praying over me. And it's like all the sin I committed all my entire life, it was like flashing in my head. It was supernatural. That's all I can say. And I've never cried so hard in my entire life. In that moment, I knew how dirty I was, how much I had sinned against God, how much I had wronged him, and how I didn't deserve his forgiveness. But in that same instant, I knew he forgave me. And everybody cleared out of the chapel, and it was just me and Big Fred in there. And I probably sat there like on my, sitting on my butt, like leaning to the side, probably crying for 20 minutes straight, sobbing for 10, and then, trying to compose myself. I remember Fred went to the back of the chapel and he just sat there in one of the back chairs. And I'm probably like 40 feet from him. And when I finally stopped crying, he came back over and he prayed with me. And he sat with me for like another 30 minutes. And my life was changed after that. God in that moment, God took my desire to drink, which is a miracle. He took the desire for me to drink away. And that doesn't happen. That just doesn't happen for most people. I know a lot of people who've came to Christ and, they've gotten sober and saved. And I'm not something special. I don't know if God just was like, he knew I couldn't do it on my own. I have no idea. But yeah, November 9th, 2014, he took the desire for alcohol away from me. So Big Fred helped me up, and I gave him a hug. Actually, Fred just passed away a few years ago. But I remember going downstairs, and it was like cleaning day where everybody in the facility, cleaned the bathrooms, cleaned the library. And I remember about 15 or 20 guys coming up and hugging me and telling me how happy they were for me. It was an amazing day. We're talking street people who were homeless and people who were in prison, and they were genuinely happy that I came to the Lord. It was amazing. I was baptized a week later at another local church. So yeah, now I'm not saying, I haven't made a conscious decision not to drink over the last 9 years. Of course, that's not the case. But there's only been 2 times that the desire to drink crept back up on me. You guys know we talked about when our daughter Holly hooked up with that guy and he threatened to kill our whole family. When we hid her in Michigan for a while, I remember when all that was going down, like the family got together, for like a powwow. We were trying to figure out what to do next. And somebody broke out a bottle of wine. just to calm everybody's nerves. I remember, I had been sober, I had been home maybe like 5 or 6 months, if that. And I just remember I had to remove myself from that situation because here this guy just threatened to kill our family and stuff. And I remember I went upstairs and into one of the bedrooms, and I just sat and prayed for a little while, and then maybe a half hour, and then I came down and I was fine, but I was under attack there. That temptation creeped up a little bit, and it was a very, very high stress situation. And then one other time, without explanation, Cassie and I went up to the casino in North Carolina. We have our annual poker trip, and this was for her birthday. We got there to the casino, and the poker tournament started like a couple hours from when we arrived. And I just had this desire to go up to the bar and really get a drink. I ended up telling Cassie, I'm just going to go up to the room and not play in the tournament. And she really didn't know why. I remember we were running a little late to go register for the tournament. But she's like, okay, I never had a chance to explain to her. And it turns out she got knocked out of the tournament her very first hand. So it was like 15 minutes later, maybe, because she had to sign up for the tournament. It was maybe a half hour later, she showed up in the hotel room. I'm like, what happened? She said, I got knocked out first hand. But I told her I felt like drinking when we walked into that place. And I had been in casinos and bars and different places, different events, never had a desire to drink. But for some reason that night, so 2 times in 9 years, the desire to drink kind of crept in, But I'll never take another drink of alcohol my entire life because I was given such a gift from God. It was such a rare gift that if I did take a drink, it'd be like slapping him in the face. And there's just no way I could ever do it. There's a real good possibility I could be a casual drinker now and have a couple beers, but I would never risk it. I would never risk offending him like that. It's just not worth it, So anyway, guys, that is what I got for you. Like I said, I've probably had 200 to 300 people reach out over the course of the last 2.5, 3 years, talking about their drinking. There's one person in particular, Patrick from Ireland. If you're watching this, buddy, I've been praying for you. At different times, Cassie and I both have. I know you've struggled, my friend, and we haven't seen you in the comments of any of our videos in probably 4 or 5 months. So if you do see this one, you're loved. And I just want you to know you're not alone. And I hope you're doing well, my friend. Even if you're not doing the carnivore diet, or I hope you found some peace, and I hope you got off that bottle. Or if you didn't, you're thinking about it. That night in chapel, I really didn't know what had happened as far as, I didn't realize the desire to drink had been taken from me. When I really realized it was rock solid was about 6 weeks later. There was a gentleman, an elderly gentleman, that came to the program like once a week, and he would offer to talk to anybody and pray with any of the guys who had been through a trauma like child molestation or, being beaten, or anything really. And I took him up on his offer, and once a week I met with him and we talked about, my sister's murder, my mom's murder, and we met for like a half hour a week in a little sitting room. We talked about forgiveness, and that's the place I had to get to, was forgiving the 2 men who had taken my mom and my sister. And it took 6 weeks of a lot of prayer and spending time in the Word of God. And I remember I saw Mike that 6th or 7th week or whatever we had for that half hour appointment. And he came in and he looked at me, and I teared up and I hugged him. And all I said was, I did it. I was able to do it. And he pulled away from me and he said, amen. And he said, my work's done here. And he gave me another hug, and I never saw him again after that. I was in the program another 3.5 months, and just our paths never crossed. It's a big place, but yeah, he was in his 70s at the time, so he's a good dude. So my second day in the program, I got saved, and I spent the next 5 months just learning about the Word of God and the Bible, and just soaking it up, and God restored my marriage. I came home. Cassie recommitted to God. Little Larry got saved, and it really just transformed our entire life. And our life didn't get easier after that. We were under major attack from the enemy for the first couple of years after I went home. And he just brought us through it, What's sad in our society? It's not a real popular subject to talk about, but Jesus foretold that, you will be hated for my namesake. And in our society, Christians are persecuted, and they're misunderstood. So that's how I quit drinking, guys. A little unorthodox, but I tried every way known to man to quit drinking, and it didn't work. And God stepped in, as soon as I humbled myself and I was just like, I can't do this anymore. The supernatural happened. Anyway, we'll see how this video comes out after the edit. This is one of those just sit down and speak from the heart kind of videos. I prayed before I hit the record button, and I really asked God to just use me, in any way he sees fit. And I really hope this video reaches somebody out there, somebody watching, whether you have a drinking problem or not. Our channel isn't a Christian channel, but when I talk about alcohol and giving it up, I cannot not talk about this. So I'm glad I made this video, and I really appreciate you guys watching it, especially those of you who aren't Christian and you took the time to sit down and listen. I have a lot of friends and family who are not professing Christians. So, and I love every one of them. So I really appreciate you sitting through. And, I believe you heard a real miracle, that the change in me was, I always say, the guy falls out of an airplane, his parachute doesn't open, and he hits the ground, he breaks his back and his neck, and he's paralyzed for 10 years. And then one day he comes and humbles himself before God, and miraculously he stands up out of his wheelchair. Doctors say he would never walk again. That's how profound my experience was, for him to take away that desire to drink. And I never had, I forgot to mention this, I never had another flash, another nightmare. All my post-traumatic symptoms were gone, which is part of the miracle. So anyway, I love you guys, and really appreciate you stopping by for this one. There's really not much more to add to that. Hey, you guys thought you were rid of me already. It is 12:42 a.m. I just finished this edit, but I forgot to mention one thing in the video. After I got sober, I started editing as a hobby. And the very first video I ever edited was a thank you to Miracle Hill Ministries for what they had done for me. And I can't put that on our YouTube channel because it's got a Christian song that would get copyrighted, but I'm going to put the link to that video down in the description, so anybody who wants to check that out can check that out. I'm pretty proud of it. It took me like 4 weeks to make the video, and then I sent it to the ministry, and yeah, so if you guys want to see that, Larry's very first edit ever. But I'm enjoying some of Cassie's jerky, and I'm going to get this uploaded to YouTube. and you know, editing this and getting it ready for you guys. I shed some tears preparing it. This has been a long time coming, and for those of you who have been waiting for it, you know, I know not thousands of you, but there have been some people who've wanted to know how I quit the drink. So remember, no sugar, no carbs, no cheating. Try not to drink that alcohol. I love you guys. Later.